Okay, so that is just adding an effect, and so you'll notice that the effect shows up underneath the layer that it's been added to. I can turn the effect off, okay? If I had more than one effect, they would be listed here under the stroke, okay? And notice also there are other ways to do this. So I double-clicked here and I got this dialog box. You can also go up in the top menu to Layer, and then you have here layer styles, and you can go directly to whichever one of these you want and it will open up. So if I wanted to add a drop shadow here, okay, it opens up the same dialog box. It's just another way to get to that same um, um, dialog box with that set of tools. Okay, so because I just turned that on, you can see that it sets a very faint drop shadow, which I can then change. I can darken, I can change the spread and the distance, okay, and I can turn on and off the preview so that I can see or hide that function. Okay, I'm going to turn this drop box off, the drop shadow off, because we don't need that for now, and I'm going to hit OK. All right, so right now we only have a single effect, which is the stroke. Notice that I can also double click this and make some changes to it. So if I went back to my stroke here, I can change, if I wanted to, the width of my stroke. I can change whether it is positioned inside or outside, okay, and that's going to, let me turn my preview on, that switches it from the inside to the outside of the image, okay, because it's bordering this image, right? So if I set it to outside, and then I also have things like on opacity, if I wanted to have, you know, a 50% opacity or whatever, okay, and of course I can change colors as well. All right, I'm going to cancel that because I'm happy with the way that looks, but I'm going to continue moving along. Okay, so that is adding effects to a layer, and we're going to do a bit more of that in a few minutes. For now, let's turn off these layers, and we're going to go down to our pineapple layer. I'm going to make a duplicate of this layer there are a couple ways to do this. I can right click and say duplicate layer. I can drag the layer down to the new layer icon and it will duplicate and make a copy, or I can just hit on my keyboard, and there are other ways. I can go layer, duplicate, okay, or I can hit Command J on my keyboard, and if you're working with PC, it's Control J, okay, it will duplicate. Okay, so there are a bunch of ways to do that. And now I've got two versions of this pineapple stacked because they're identical. They're stacked exactly right on top of each other. Okay, you can't see the one behind it because it's exactly in the same position, okay, but it's there. Okay, so with that, I wanted just to demonstrate to you what blending modes are. Now, I'm working off. I mentioned that I'm working off of this Adobe Acrobat lesson in a book, and in this tutorial they give you kind of a lot of different settings, and they're fine, and they're useful, and it's good to learn all of these, like these numbers and everything. But to use these sorts of tools, the only way to learn them well is to experiment. There's not a right or a wrong way to do this. There are just ways that make the effect that you want, and so much of it is experimentation. So you may find tutorials on YouTube that are like, blending and changing and adjustment layers, and they'll give really specific numbers. That's just from kind of exploration and experimenting. Um, there's not really a guide to how they work. I mean, some of them will give you, from the names, you can kind of tell what they'll do. So like darken. What's going to happen is it's going to use the pixels on this layer, and it's going to darken them against the pixels behind here. Okay, so if I change that to darken, you can see from normal, even that doesn't do much. If I try multiply, it multiplies the layers. If I went to color burn, that burns the image against the image behind it. And these terms come from some sort of, they're from like film photography, and they're the way when you were using photography kind of in the olden days, a long time ago, back when film was the way, and darkrooms were the way photography were created, you could use different effects by, burning images or using different chemicals. You could create some of these different effects, and that's what some of these are referring to, but obviously these are done digitally. So so much of this depends on what the image is and what the image behind it is. Anyways, whatever. Like I was just saying here, experimentation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to overlay. And what overlay typically does is it oversaturates. So that's my original. And by turning this layer here to an overlay layer, it saturates the image and it just kind of punches up some of those bright colors, and it gives me kind of some darker darks, right? Notice the difference. That looks a little washed out, but when you kind of punch up that saturation by creating an overlay, it really kind of punches up the contrast, okay? So again, that's just one of the ways to make this thing work. There are lots of other ways for you to try. Just experiment with them, okay? All right, let's turn back on our beach layer right here, and we're gonna move it around. So notice that I've got my move tool selected here, and I can take this and I can move it on my on this layer because it is separate from these layers. I can also do things like transform it. So I'm going to go up to either I can go on my keyboard on a Mac Command T and on a PC Control T, and it'll give me this what's called a transform gizmo. Okay, I'm going to hit Escape and show you that you can also get that by going Edit Transform. Now there is a free transform, which is what I just showed you, Command T. There's also a transform which will give you the specific kind of different transform options. So there's a scale option, a rotate option, a skew, a distort, a perspective, and a warp. And you can experiment with those to see what they do. But you can get all of those by using the free transform tool. So here's my scale. If I put my cursor just outside of this box, I can rotate. And then with the different keyboard modifiers, Control, Option, Alt, or Command, I can either, I can skew them, okay, I can hit Escape, Command T, I can hold Shift, and I can warp notice here, if I go Command T and I just make this smaller, notice that it's constraining the image. It's not changing the ratio. It brings the width and height down at the same proportion. But if I hold Shift, then I can squish it in sort of different perspectives. Okay? All right, I'm going to cancel that. And what I want to do is I want to go Command T. I'm going to rotate it to about there. I'm going to bring it down in size, and then I'm going to reposition it maybe around here. Maybe I'll do it kind of like this way. All right, and once I'm done with that, I can either check this checkbox here. I can double click anywhere inside of this box, or I can hit enter on my keyboard and it commits that change. Okay, so we've now made a transformation and committed it to the file. All right, if you're not sure, you can always make a duplicate of your original file, turn off. So say I go back to my history here to before I made that transformation, and say I'm not sure what I want to do with it. I can make a duplicate, turn this layer off, and then make changes to this layer until I'm happy with it, right? And then, you know, if I do like it or don't like it or whatever, I can try this, and I can make another duplicate and say, you know, I don't want it that way. I'm going to try, maybe I'm going to try doing Command T. I'm going to maybe skew this one. I don't know, whatever you decide that you want to try. Okay, and then you can, once you've done that, you can kind of compare which one you like. Okay, so we're going to keep that, and I'm going to dump this one, and I'm going to dump this one by dragging to the garbage, and I'm also just going to get rid of the word copy there because I don't want that to be a copy. Okay, great. All right, moving along. So we've now skewed or transformed our beach. We're going to create a new layer around the back because right now we've got this pineapple with a transparency showing through a white background. Well, what I want to do is I want to create a new layer by clicking here, either here to create a new layer. I can create a new layer either from, no, I don't want to do it here. I'm going to go layer, new layer. I can add it here, and I'm sure there's a keyboard shortcut as well. I'm going to double click the word layer 1 and call it clouds. And I'm going to create some clouds using a filter. Okay, the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to choose a color. So I'm going to pick a color of this, whatever this C here, like a blue. I'm going to do it here. Okay, and I'm going to get something a bit more vibrant than that, maybe something like that. And so now I've got a blue and a white as my two colors, and I'm going to go filter, and I'm going to go to render, and I'm going to choose clouds. And what that's going to do is it's going to create kind of a cloud effect. Let's turn all these off. Okay, and notice that this is different every time you do it. So I can make another one and again go filter, render, clouds, and this again is a different, because this is done using a filter, it's basically some math that creates this. So that'll be different every time, but that works for me to have some clouds in the background. Now I can't think of a time when I would realistically use this, but we do end up using it only because we learned it here. You'll see it get repeated in one of the dog challenges that you will be doing later in this unit. So pay attention to how we did that. Okay, so that's creating some artwork using a filter. Next, let's look at how we can drag in some more layers. So let's go open up another file. I'm going to go back over to my Windows, and I'm going to open up my flower image. Okay, I want to drag this. I don't want to have to open this up and put it over here. I want to drag it directly into my file. So I'm going to take it here. Notice that my clouds layer is active. I'm going to drag the file right from here, right into Photoshop, and it's going to put it right above the layer that was active. Okay, it gives me this transform gizmo in case I want to make it bigger or smaller or rotate it or do anything I want, but I don't want to do any of those things. I just want to click OK and accept the size as it is. Okay, once I'm done with that, I'm going to position it kind of higher so that I can see it, and I'm going to move it down to about there. Okay, so that I kind of have it off to the side here. All right, with that, I'm going to turn my pink flower on, and I might maybe just move that a little bit out of the way as well. Okay, next, let's look at making some text. So far, I think all of this is pretty straightforward, and a lot of this will be, I don't want to say repetitive, but it should remind you of some of the things we've done in Illustrator. Some of the tools are similar. Okay, next, let's take a look at our Hawaii text, which is here. Okay, this is not font. It was a font at one point, but it's been flattened down so that it is no longer editable. So keep that in mind. You can add text, and we will in a moment, but this is not text. Okay, I'll show you the difference in a second. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add a bit of a gradient to this. So first, let's change our color from blue to like a yellowy orange, something like maybe that. Okay, so that's my foreground color. That's a bit mustardy. Let's try maybe there. Okay, and then I'm going to go to my gradient tool, which is here. And then if I just drag a gradient, what's going to happen is it's going to fill the whole screen with that, and I don't want that. So I'm going to undo that, Command Z, and I only want to fill in where these letters are, okay, where the letters Hawaii are. Now, there's a couple ways I can do that. I mentioned earlier that there are some locks here. Okay, this locks the whole layer, so nothing can happen. I can no longer do anything. I can't move this Hawaii layer because it's locked. I can't, draw on this layer. I can't. I probably edit it. I select it, but I can't move anything on the actual layer. If I tried to move it, it's locked. Okay, so I'm going to unlock that. The other thing I can do is I can lock the transparency. So here I've got this little checkerboard thing. If I click on this, what that means is it's going to lock the transparency of this layer, which means what's transparent will stay transparent and what's not transparent will stay not transparent. That means that I can now take my gradient here and I can draw, and it'll apply only to the place where my layer has pixels already because I've locked that transparency. If I went edit fill and I filled it with the foreground color, which is this yellow, it's only going to fill in the part where there are pixels already. Okay? All right. What I actually want to do is I want to do that gradient. So I'm going to go gradient, and I'm just going to drag this kind of up from here to there, and there's my gradient. Okay, I've got about a minute left in this tutorial, so we're going to do one last thing before we close this and move on. I'm going to add a little bit of text. So I'm going to go to the text tool, type tool I should say, and I'm just going to click below the word Hawaii, and what you'll see is it's going to create a new layer here, okay? And this T indicates that this is a text layer, okay? And I mentioned earlier that Hawaii is not text, but this is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start typing. I'm going to type the words more expensive than Cuba. That's a great tagline for Hawaii, and I'm going to reposition that where I want it, maybe there, and I'm going to change the color to black. Great, so that looks all right. There's my, actually I'm going to change it from black to green. Pick a nice grassy green there. All right, so there we have our green text. And in our next tutorial, we're going to look at how we can add some effects to make it less kind kind of blended into the background there and easier to read. Okay, see you in the next video.